directed by Kevin Macdonald and stars Channing Tatum, Jamie Bell, and Donald Sutherland. It's based on a 1954 novel written by Rosemary Sutcliffe entitled The Eagle of the Ninth. It tells the story of a young Roman centurion, Marcus Flavius Aquila, played by Channing Tatum, whose father was the senior centurion of the Ninth Legion, which disappeared in northern Britain, shocking the Roman Empire and bringing dishonor to the Aquila family. Determined to salvage their family name, Marcus has become a hero and famed commander in the army, but is discharged after a severe injury. When rumors surface regarding the Eagle Standard of the Ninth Legion being seen in the north, Marcus and a slave named Esca set out to recover it, heading into hostile territory beyond Hadrian's Wall. The Eagle is a movie I've been aware of for a long time, but had never seen until quite recently. Going in, I wasn't sure whether it would be more along the lines of a sword and sandals epic in the vein of 300, which I haven't seen, but that whole look and style just really doesn't interest me. What I was pleasantly surprised to find was a quite old-fashioned adventure story, and it came as no surprise that it was based on a novel from the 50s. It very much had the feel of a boys' own adventure type of story, with two men on a mission taking on all comers, with no pesky romances to get in the way. Channing Tatum is quite good in the lead, embodying the sort of heroic, no-nonsense character that this story needs. If this movie had been made in the 50s, I can see someone like Victor Mature or Robert Taylor playing this type of part, and I thought Channing Tatum fit that mold quite well. He does very well in the action scenes. It's obvious that he did a lot of training for the using of a sword and shield. Jamie Bell, as I mentioned earlier, plays a slave, the son of a chieftain of the Britons, whose life is saved by Channing Tatum's character during a gladiator-type show. After this, he obviously owes him his life, and accompanies Marcus once he decides to set out on his journey. He also is quite good in the role, and there's an interesting role reversal of sorts the farther they get into the northern country. One thing I will say is that there isn't a lot of character development during the movie. The type of character they start out as is quite consistent, and any changes in the characters are pretty predictable. Although, when starting out, I expected the relationship between Marcus and Esca to be much more of a focus of the film, and it is to a certain extent, but the overall focus is much more on the plot and where they're going next. From the making of that I watched about it, I think the intention was to show how Marcus' view of Esca changes from that of a slave to a human being. But I never found that Marcus ever treated Esca or any slave very badly, especially in comparison to the other Romans. Which might mean their view of each other changes at the same time, with Esca realizing Marcus isn't just your typical Roman. Something else that was mentioned in the behind the scenes was how the focus was kept on doing almost everything for real. Building sets, the number of extras in the battle scenes, and everything, really. These days, the assumption is that almost everything is CGI, which I find disappointing because it's quite rare that CGI goes unnoticed. Even the biggest budget movies can't hide the fact that the background behind their actors looks so fake in most cases. It might be a product of the cinematography that I didn't realize how much of this was real. I did find myself thinking in the early scenes of the movie if this was more of a lower budget movie. The opening act of the film is set at a Roman garrison, and a great deal of the shots in it are quite closely framed, making me wonder if this was a rather minimal set, that they were trying to hide the fact that there wasn't more built. But again, seeing the behind the scenes, I was shocked to see that they built 3 full sides of the fort, and it looked great. So while the darker close-up shots were obviously more of a stylistic choice, I think I would have preferred if we had been able to see more of the fort itself, especially during the battle scenes that were set there. Speaking of, though, I really enjoyed the battle that was set just outside the fort walls, where Marcus leads his men to rescue a patrol that had been captured by a band of Celtic warriors. The movie does a great job depicting the Roman fighting formation called the testudo, where the legionaries use their shields to form a tortoise shell style protection barrier. And it was in that scene that I thought the close-up dominated cinematography worked really well. It really shows the claustrophobic nature of marching while being covered, and then suddenly there are men leaping on top of you and swords smashing against the shields from all sides. Also, the method of opening a gap in the shield wall, piercing outwards with a sword, and then closing ranks immediately, I thought was pretty interesting in a military strategy way. Once we get into the journey to find the eagle, I thought the whole look and feel of the movie changed, which is not a complaint whatsoever. Seeing the two of them riding over hills with these foggy green mountains in the distance, I thought the cinematography there was extremely well done. The movie was shot in Hungary and Scotland, and I'm assuming these riding scenes and traveling shots were mostly done in Scotland, and I thought they looked great. The whole storytelling style of riding, then an incident where they learn more information to further their quest, then back to riding, really made me start to think of this movie as a sort of ancient Roman version of The Searchers. Kind of everything about it, like the hero aided by a man who identifies more with the people they're fighting than with the man he's with. The native seal people here standing in for the Comanches, of course. All of these parallels really worked for me. That whole second act of the movie really does feel like a Western to me. In particular, a scene where they're setting up camp and one of them suddenly realizes they're being watched and has already figured out how many there are and where they're hiding. Just a really, really good scene, and so reminiscent of similar scenes in tons and tons of Westerns. I've mentioned some of the action from near the beginning of the movie. There's also quite a bit of action that comes later on as well. And I thought some of it was quite well shot, but unfortunately a lot of it is done in the quick cut, close cropped style that so much action is done in. I always prefer, especially in hand-to-hand fight scenes or sword fights, just pull the camera back. I'm always more invested when I can see the context of what is happening. The danger of the fight is always much more present when you're seeing the impact and reaction of the people fighting in full. Otherwise, it can just become movement and sound. I think it can also do a disservice to the training that these actors and stunt people have gone through when it seems the editing or the photography is hiding something. Not all of the action is shot this way, but quite a bit was, and I know from the scenes that aren't, that these actors are capable of the moves necessary for these fights. So overall, I would say if you're in the mood for a good, old-fashioned adventure story, nothing too mind-blowing or unusual, you should check it out. It's just a straight-ahead, well-told story with some beautiful photography in the mountains of Scotland, and I'm glad I watched it. I hope you enjoyed this review. For more, please check back to my channel, Hildebrand Productions. Thanks for watching, and adios for now.